The world stopped on November 22, 1963. A Friday, a bright autumn day in Dallas, Texas, that would forever be etched into the collective memory of humanity as the moment innocence was irrevocably shattered. President John F. Kennedy, a vibrant beacon of hope and progress, was riding in a motorcade through Dealey Plaza, waving to adoring crowds when the unthinkable happened. Shots rang out, sharp and sudden, tearing through the festive atmosphere, ripping through the very fabric of American idealism. The image of Jacqueline Kennedy, resplendent in pink, scrambling across the trunk of the limousine, remains a haunting testament to the chaos and terror that erupted in an instant. The nation, indeed the entire globe, watched in disbelief and profound grief as a generation's promise was extinguished in a hail of bullets. In the immediate aftermath, a profound sense of urgency gripped Washington. The assassination of a president on American soil was an unprecedented trauma, demanding swift answers, a clear narrative to stabilize a reeling populace and prevent further panic. Within a week, on November 29, 1963, President Lyndon B. Johnson, still reeling from the sudden assumption of power, issued Executive Order 11130, establishing the President's Commission on the Assassination of President Kennedy. Its mandate was clear: to investigate all the facts and circumstances surrounding the assassination and report its findings. Chaired by Chief Justice Earl Warren, the commission comprised distinguished figures, including former CIA Director Allen Dulles, then Congressman Gerald Ford, and Senator Richard Russell. Their task was monumental, their responsibility immense. Their conclusion, delivered 10 months later on September 24, 1964, was unequivocal. Lee Harvey Oswald, a former Marine and self-proclaimed Marxist, had acted alone. He was the sole assassin, firing 3 shots from the 6th-floor window of the Texas School Book Depository, one of which missed. One struck President Kennedy and Governor John Connally, and the final, fatal shot struck the president in the head. The commission asserted that Oswald was a disaffected loner, driven by his own twisted ideology, with no evidence linking him to any larger conspiracy, domestic or foreign. This was the official truth, presented to a public desperate for closure, a narrative intended to heal a fractured nation. But from the very moment the Warren Report was unveiled, a tremor of doubt began to ripple through the American consciousness, a whisper that would grow into a roaring dissent. The speed and decisiveness of the Commission's verdict, while perhaps politically expedient, struck many as too neat, too convenient. How could such a complex, horrific event be reduced to the actions of a single, disturbed individual, especially when the facts presented seemed to strain the bounds of credulity? This immediate skepticism wasn't born of malice, but of a deep-seated unease, a gnawing feeling that something crucial had been overlooked, or worse, deliberately obscured. Consider the magic bullet, officially Commission Exhibit 399. According to the Warren Commission, a single 6.5mm bullet, fired from Oswald's Mannlicher Carcano rifle, entered President Kennedy's upper back, exited his throat, then proceeded to strike Governor Connally in the back, exit his chest, shatter his wrist, and finally lodge itself in his thigh. All told, this single projectile inflicted 7 separate wounds on 2 men, remaining remarkably intact, almost pristine, save for a slight flattening. The trajectory required for such a feat, from the 6th floor of the book depository, through both men in the specific positions they were believed to be in, seemed to defy the laws of physics. Critics immediately pointed out the improbability, dubbing it the magic bullet, a term that perfectly encapsulated the public's growing incredulity. Then there was the Zapruder film, the silent, terrifying 26-second home movie shot by Abraham Zapruder. It captured the assassination in agonizing detail, frame by frame, becoming the most scrutinized piece of evidence in history. While the commission used it to support their findings, millions who watched it saw something else entirely. They saw President Kennedy's head snap violently backward and to the left after the fatal shot, an action many ballistics experts and medical professionals argued was inconsistent with a shot fired from behind, from the book depository. This seemingly crucial detail, suggesting a shot from the front or right, perhaps from the infamous grassy knoll, directly contradicted the lone gunman theory and fueled a torrent of alternative explanations. The inconsistencies extended beyond ballistics and film evidence, seeping into the very fabric of witness testimonies. Dozens of eyewitnesses in Dealey Plaza reported hearing shots originating not just from the book depository, but also from the area of the grassy knoll, a small grassy hill to the president's front and right. Many reported smelling gunpowder near the knoll. Yet, the Warren Commission largely discounted these testimonies, prioritizing those that supported the single-shooter theory. People like S.M. Holland, who claimed to have seen smoke near the knoll, and numerous others who heard shots from that direction, found their accounts marginalized or dismissed as unreliable, despite their proximity to the events. This selective use of testimony fostered a profound distrust, suggesting a predetermined outcome rather than an open investigation. Furthermore, medical evidence became a battleground of conflicting interpretations. The initial autopsy conducted at Bethesda Navale Hospital by military pathologists, who had little experience with gunshot wounds, presented a picture that differed significantly from the emergency room doctors at Parkland Memorial Hospital in Dallas. The Parkland doctors, who had intimately observed President Kennedy's wounds, described an entry wound in the throat that appeared to be from the front, and a much larger exit wound in the back of his head. The Bethesda autopsy, however, concluded the throat wound was an exit wound, and the head wound an entry, aligning with the shots from behind narrative. The discrepancies were glaring, the confusion profound, and the public was left to wonder why the most immediate medical observations were seemingly contradicted by later, less experienced assessments. The capabilities of Oswald's alleged weapon, the 6.5 mm Mannlicher Carno rifle, also came under intense scrutiny. Could a relatively inexperienced marksman like Oswald, using a bolt-action rifle, fire 3 accurate shots in the short time frame indicated by the Zapruder film, approximately 5.6 seconds between the first and third shot, with a significant pause in between? Reenactments conducted by the FBI for the Commission, and later by independent experts, demonstrated the difficulty of achieving such a feat. The time required to cycle the bolt, reacquire the target, and fire accurately was considerable, leading many to question if a single shooter could indeed have delivered all the shots attributed to him. Beyond the specific evidence, the very process of the Warren Commission itself drew heavy criticism. Its proceedings were largely conducted in secret, behind closed doors, with limited public access to the evidence or testimony. Key documents were sealed for decades, fueling suspicion that information detrimental to the lone gunman theory was being withheld. The Commission's members, under immense pressure to provide a swift and definitive answer, were accused of rushing to judgment, of seeking to quell fear rather than uncover the full, unvarnished truth. The rapid conclusion that Oswald acted alone, despite the numerous lingering questions, felt less like a comprehensive investigation and more like an official declaration designed to close a painful chapter. The subsequent assassination of Lee Harvey Oswald himself, just 2 days after Kennedy's death, by Jack Ruby in the basement of the Dallas Police Headquarters, only deepened the mystery and cemented the public's distrust. The lone suspect, the only one who could potentially provide answers, was silenced before he could ever stand trial. This seemingly convenient turn of events, broadcast live on national television, felt too perfectly orchestrated for many, amplifying the sense that a larger hidden hand was at play. The Warren Commission's verdict, intended to bring closure, instead ignited a firestorm of skepticism that has burned for 6 decades. It laid the groundwork for an enduring national distrust in official narratives, particularly concerning events of profound public consequence. The unanswered questions, the inconsistencies, the dismissed testimonies, and the convenient coincidences coalesced into a potent brew of doubt, shaping the American psyche and fostering a fertile ground for countless conspiracy theories. The Commission's report, rather than settling the matter, became the starting point for a relentless pursuit of alternative truths, a quest that continues to this very day, leaving a nation forever grappling with the haunting question, who really killed JFK? The verdict was delivered, but the fire of skepticism it ignited still burns brightly, a testament to the enduring power of doubt and the profound human need for genuine answers. The official narrative, cemented by the Warren Commission, paints a picture of a lone, disgruntled ex-Marine, Lee Harvey Oswald, acting entirely on his own. Yet for millions that explanation has always felt hollow, insufficient to account for the seismic shock of November 22, 1963. If Oswald was merely a pawn, or worse, entirely innocent, then the true architects of this American tragedy remain hidden, lurking in the shadows of history. The question then becomes not star what star happened, but star who star made it happen, and star why star. This is where the labyrinth truly begins, winding through a cast of characters and motives so potent, so deeply entrenched, that the very idea sends shivers down the spine of democracy. For decades, the finger of suspicion has pointed toward the most obvious beneficiaries of chaos, organized crime. John F. Kennedy and, more aggressively, his brother Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy had declared an unprecedented war on the mafia. Bobby Kennedy's relentless pursuit of mob bosses like Sam Giancana of Chicago, Carlos Marcello of New Orleans, and Santo Traficante Jr. of Florida represented an existential threat to their illicit empires. These were men who operated outside the law, who understood power, and who were not averse to extreme measures to protect their interests. Their motives were clear: revenge, and the removal of a political family that threatened to dismantle their criminal enterprises brick by brick. A pause, a shift in focus. The connections are chillingly proximate. Jack Ruby, the man who silenced Oswald just 2 days after the assassination, had undeniable ties to the Dallas underworld, a network that stretched directly to Marcello and Giancana. Ruby's strip clubs and bars were known haunts for mob figures, and his sudden violent act against Oswald fueled immediate speculation that he was acting on orders to prevent the assassin from ever revealing a larger conspiracy. Furthermore, the mafia had a documented history of working with, and then feeling betrayed by, the U.S. government, particularly the CIA, in plots to assassinate Fidel Castro. Could this history of collaboration and subsequent disillusionment have provided both the means and the motivation for a deadly reversal of fortunes? The echoes of the Bay of Pigs disaster also reverberated through the exile communities in South Florida, giving rise to another powerful and deeply embittered group: anti-Castro Cuban exiles. For these fiercely patriotic men, Kennedy's perceived abandonment during the failed 1961 invasion was an unforgivable betrayal. They had been trained, armed, and promised American air support, only to see it withdrawn at the last moment, leaving thousands of their brethren to be captured or killed. Their dream of liberating Cuba from communist rule was crushed, and many held Kennedy personally responsible for their humiliation and loss. A moment to consider the depth of their rage. Groups like Alpha 66 and the DRE Directorate Revolutionary Front were not just political activists, they were paramilitary organizations, hardened by years of covert operations and desperate for Castro's overthrow. They possessed the skills, the weaponry, and the sheer fanatical zeal to undertake such a drastic act. Lee Harvey Oswald himself had surprisingly close and often contradictory interactions with these groups in New Orleans in the summer of 1963. He was seen distributing pro-Castro leaflets, yet also publicly debated with anti-Castro figures, seemingly infiltrating their circles. Was this a genuine political contradiction, or was Oswald in fact a handler, or a dupe, being maneuvered into position by forces far greater than himself, forces that wished to exploit the exile's rage? Then there is the shadow of the Central Intelligence Agency itself, specifically rogue factions within its sprawling apparatus. The Bay of Pigs catastrophe was not just a blow to the Cuban exiles, but a profound humiliation for the CIA's Old Boys Network, the architects of covert operations, who felt directly undermined by President Kennedy. Many in the agency believed Kennedy was too soft on communism, too willing to negotiate with the Soviet Union, and too reluctant to employ aggressive tactics for regime change. His firing of CIA Director Allen Dulles and Deputy Director Charles Cabell after the Bay of Pigs only deepened their resentment. A chilling thought. These were individuals who had spent their careers orchestrating coups, destabilizing governments, and even plotting assassinations around the globe. They possessed unparalleled expertise in deniable operations, disinformation, and the manipulation of assets. A president who challenged their methods, questioned their budget, and even floated the idea of splintering the CIA into 1,000 pieces and scattering it to the winds, as Kennedy famously quipped, could be seen as an internal enemy. The motive here wasn't just revenge, but a perceived need to protect national security interests as they understood them, by removing a leader they believed was steering the country in a dangerous direction, away from aggressive Cold War confrontation. Finally, we confront the most formidable and perhaps most insidious force, the military-industrial complex. President Dwight D. Eisenhower, in his farewell address in 1961, famously warned the nation about the unwarranted influence of this powerful alliance between a massive military establishment and a large arms industry. Kennedy, a young president with a vision of peace, seemed intent on challenging this very complex. He pursued détente with the Soviet Union, famously signed the Limited Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, and crucially began to question America's deepening involvement in Vietnam. Consider the implications. In October 1963, Kennedy signed National Security Action Memorandum 263, which ordered the withdrawal of 1,000 American military personnel from Vietnam by the end of the year, with a complete withdrawal by 1965. This was in direct opposition to the hawkish elements within the Pentagon and the defense industry, who saw Vietnam as a critical front in the Cold War and a lucrative market for their products. A president who sought to scale back military engagement and reduce defense spending was a direct threat to their power, their profits, and their vision of American global dominance. The sheer scale and influence of this complex, with its unparalleled resources and reach into every corner of government, made it a terrifyingly plausible candidate for orchestrating a conspiracy of this magnitude. What emerges from this shadowy landscape is not a single, isolated plot, but a chilling tapestry of interconnected grievances, a confluence of powerful forces, each with the motive and the means to desire Kennedy's removal. Could it have been an unholy alliance, a convergence of interests where the mafia provided the muscle, the exiles provided the cover, and rogue elements within the intelligence agencies or the military-industrial complex provided the planning and protection? The idea of a state within a state, of unelected powers manipulating the levers of government, is a terrifying prospect, yet one that has resonated deeply with those who refuse to accept the official narrative. A final, unsettling question lingers. The evidence for each of these theories is circumstantial, often fragmented, and fiercely debated. Yet the sheer volume of unanswered questions, inconsistencies, and suppressed information continues to fuel the belief that the truth lies far beyond the sixth floor of the Texas Schoolbook Depository. The assassination of John F. Kennedy did not merely take a life. It extinguished a future, altered the course of a nation, and cast a permanent pall of suspicion over the very institutions designed to protect American democracy. The search for the real killers, for the hidden hands that pulled the strings, continues, a relentless quest for an answer that, if ever fully revealed, could fundamentally redefine our understanding of power, conspiracy, and the true cost of silence. 58 years. For more than half a century, the bullet that tore through President John F. Kennedy on November 22, 1963, has echoed through American history, a wound that refuses to heal. Dallas, Texas, a bright autumn day transformed into a crucible of national trauma, gave birth not just to sorrow, but to a profound and enduring skepticism about the official narrative. For millions, the Warren Commission's conclusion, a lone gunman, Lee Harvey Oswald, was never enough. It was a story too neat, too convenient, too quickly delivered in the wake of unimaginable chaos. And as the decades rolled on, the relentless pursuit of truth found itself locked in a silent, often frustrating battle with the very government sworn to protect its people. A battle for transparency, fought over mountains of classified documents. Pacing cue, a slow, deliberate shift. The promise of light came with the John F. Kennedy Assassination Records Collection Act of 1992. Born from the public outcry following Oliver Stone's controversial film star, JFK star, which ignited a fresh wave of suspicion, this landmark legislation mandated that all government records related to the assassination be publicly disclosed by October 26, 2017, unless the president certified that continued postponement was absolutely necessary to protect an identifiable harm to military defense, intelligence operations, law enforcement, or foreign relations. It was a monumental commitment, a pledge to finally open the vaults and allow a full, unvarnished look at the darkest chapter of modern American history. The National Archives, repository of our collective memory, began the painstaking process of declassification, releasing millions of pages of documents over the ensuing years. But the journey from promise to full disclosure has been anything but straightforward. Pacing Q, a quickening of pace, introducing conflict. For every document unsealed, another remained stubbornly redacted, its crucial passages obscured by thick black lines, a stark visual representation of information withheld. For every revelation, new questions emerged, deepening the labyrinth rather than illuminating an exit. We learned, for instance, of the intense, often chaotic internal investigations by the FBI and CIA in the immediate aftermath. We saw the frantic attempts to piece together Oswald's life, his movements, his known associations. Documents showed the FBI's surveillance of Oswald in the weeks leading up to the assassination, their awareness of his volatile nature, his defection to the Soviet Union, and his pro-Castro activities. Yet these early releases, while voluminous, rarely provided the definitive smoking gun the public craved. Instead, they painted a picture of bureaucratic inefficiency, interagency rivalries, and a pervasive atmosphere of secrecy that seemed to precede and then envelop the investigation itself. Pacing Q. A slightly more urgent tone, focusing on specific examples. The digital age brought new visibility to these releases. In 2017, as the final deadline approached, President Donald Trump faced the ultimate decision: release everything or uphold the exceptions. The world watched. On October 26, 2017, and again in April 2018, thousands more documents were released. These batches were highly anticipated, promising to finally reveal the long-hidden secrets. What did they expose? We saw further evidence of Lee Harvey Oswald's perplexing trip to Mexico City in September 1963, a journey shrouded in conflicting reports from the CIA station there. Oswald met with Soviet and Cuban officials, yet the precise nature of these interactions and the full extent of CIA surveillance on him during this critical period remained murky. Some files hinted at a mysterious second Oswald, an imposter who appeared at the Soviet embassy, raising questions about whether the CIA was tracking the real Oswald or someone else entirely. These revelations, rather than settling the debate, ignited fresh speculation about the extent of foreign intelligence involvement and the CIA's true understanding of Oswald's activities. Pacing Q, a return to a more measured, analytical tone, the documents also provided glimpses into the FBI's prior knowledge of threats against Oswald himself. One FBI memo, dated November 24, 1963, just hours before Jack Ruby shot Oswald, revealed that the Dallas FBI office had received a call threatening Oswald's life. The memo stated, "We at once notified the chief of police, and he assured us that Oswald would be given sufficient protection." Yet Oswald was killed in the basement of the Dallas police headquarters, live on national television, by Jack Ruby, a nightclub owner with alleged ties to organized crime. How could such a direct threat be known and seemingly ignored? The files detailed Ruby's erratic behavior, his connections to figures in the criminal underworld, and the intense scrutiny he came under. But they never definitively answered why Ruby, a man with no apparent political motive, silenced the primary suspect. Was it an act of patriotic rage, as he claimed, or something far more sinister, a preemptive strike to prevent Oswald from revealing a larger conspiracy? The documents hinted at these possibilities, but the full picture remained tantalizingly out of reach. Pacing Q, a shift to the present and the ongoing struggle. Even with these releases, the promise of full disclosure remained unfulfilled. President Trump, citing national security concerns, ultimately withheld thousands of records, deferring their release. This pattern continued under President Joe Biden, who in October 2021 and again in December 2022 postponed the release of the remaining classified files, citing the need to protect identifiable harm to military defense, intelligence operations, law enforcement, or the conduct of foreign relations. Each deferral, each delay, each redaction reinforces the public's deep-seated suspicion. What could possibly be so sensitive, so damaging nearly 6 decades after the event, that it cannot be revealed? Is it truly about protecting sources and methods, or is it about shielding reputations, preventing embarrassment, or perhaps, most unsettling of all, concealing a truth that fundamentally challenges the integrity of American institutions. Pacing cue. A more reflective, questioning tone. The lingering doubts are not simply the musings of fringe theorists, they are rooted in the very documents themselves. We see the CIA's extensive covert operations against Fidel Castro's Cuba, including attempts at assassination. We know that some of these operations involved figures with ties to organized crime, individuals who also had potential connections to Jack Ruby. The files unveil the complex web of Cold War espionage, the shadowy world where alliances shifted and motives were rarely clear. They expose the culture of plausible deniability, where intelligence agencies could operate with minimal oversight, their actions often unknown even to the president himself. When the official narrative rests on a lone, unstable gunman, but the backdrop is a sprawling landscape of covert plots, a frustrated intelligence community, and a heavily armed criminal underworld, it becomes increasingly difficult to accept simplicity. Pacing cue, a more emphatic, conclusive statement of the problem. The black boxes on those pages are more than just redactions. They are symbols of unresolved questions, of an incomplete history. They represent the government's continued assertion that some truths are too dangerous for its citizens to bear. This perpetual state of partial disclosure has fostered a deep mistrust, a belief that the official truth is not the whole truth, but rather a carefully constructed narrative designed to protect powerful interests. For millions of Americans, the assassination of John F. Kennedy is not a closed case, but an open wound kept festering by the refusal of their own government to provide full, unconditional transparency. The call for full disclosure is not merely about historical curiosity. It is about accountability, about the right of a democratic people to know their own history, unvarnished and unedited. The conspiracy they don't want you to know may not be explicitly spelled out in the unsealed files, but its shadow is cast by every file that remains hidden, every line that remains blacked out, every question that remains unanswered. Until every last document is released, until every redaction is lifted, the specter of deception will continue to haunt the legacy of John F. Kennedy, a chilling testament to the power of secrets in a nation demanding the truth. Thanks for watching Study Z. Remember to subscribe for more deep dives.